Yes, we all know them. These data superheroes who can quickly implement something in 5 minutes, which would be impossible in another context. And what we see here is, of course, a strong communication barrier. And ultimately, the final apology comes, yes, sorry, that I'm simply not this data superhero and can't implement it. And sounds fine. Yes, and if you're wondering what exactly the film has to do with data projects. So yes, I inserted a text slide in between, but it's just an example. This came to my attention just last year. 80% of data projects are doomed to fail. Gartner also says this, and they are not the only ones. When I looked at this, I was reminded of a drawing of mine from LinkedIn from 21. So before the AI times, it replaced me a little. I also like to scribble myself and shared it on LinkedIn. What's interesting is, has anything changed in the last few years? Actually, not really. One could say, okay, before only 8% was successful, now it's already 20. So great. But on the other hand, I still wonder, why do we even engage with such projects when the probability of success is so low? So most just fail. And I think that's because most just want to be like Iron Man up there. So they just want those extremely positive effects. And it is simply still worth it to take on these risks, even knowing that the majority will eventually end up down there saying, well, sorry. And then there are the usual excuses about why it didn't work out again. In the project, why something was not delivered again. And the question is how? How can we influence it so that perhaps we also belong more to the winners in this area? So it already starts when we decide on a project. If it starts like, yeah, I have some budget, let's do something with AI. And so eins dieser Items, die ich gesehen, in this case, it's exactly that typical image. We have to do something there, right? So if we first have to think about what we actually need to do, and such a project is kind of an end in itself, is, if we compare, Tony Stark had a very clear goal. He had to survive, and he needed to get out of this cave. And that's how the first Iron Man suit came about. It didn't look fancy, it actually looked like that. So the first Iron Man was not beautiful at all, it was quite ugly, but it worked. And that is just the opposite of the typical data project, which starts top-down with a big budget. A bit is done on the surface, but as little confrontation as possible, because it's exhausting to talk to stakeholders. And then someone says, no, I won't touch this process, because otherwise, someone complains because something isn't working, because something is different. We'd rather spruce up a little something on the side. And no conflict. That was just not an option for Tony's day. So conflict avoidance didn't work there. He had to get out, he had to survive, and that's why it also works. Basically, what we experience in traditional projects is more like putting lipstick on the pig. That is, we paint something nicely, and then would essentially say, okay, we have now 3 months, and we have a certain project progress. It's as if Tony had sat in the cave and first polished the Iron Man helmet, nicely golden, and then said, yeah, I have 20% project progress. He would still be dead afterward. And the question now would be, so this classic MVP, why was it absolutely necessary and possible for him? But why do we so rarely see this in real projects? From my perspective, that's because projects quickly develop a certain life of their own, and where experts sit among themselves and say, okay, they want to do something with AI. Now let's think about what to do first. And then everyone somehow has their own favorite technology and says, okay, so with that, we can do really great stuff. Let's try it out. We can quickly show successes. So I'm generally not an enemy of low-hanging fruits, because when we implement a good use case, then you can, of course, also create excitement. You can also involve more people, but it also has the risk. Who then decides on the prioritization? If it's just the project itself, the experts among themselves, then it's more likely decided by what do I like the most? Where can I quickly do something I like best? With whom can I work better? And yes, no real value is created. Instead, people just focus on themselves. And then there are vanity metrics, which are really something special. Essentially, experts decide themselves how they are evaluated. So I determine myself the project progress, and my success are measured in the terabytes of data that I have transferred somewhere. And then I can say, yes, we built pipelines here. We copied so many terabytes of data. So mission accomplished, tasks completed, but for the business users, there's absolutely nothing yet. So no value added at all. But we can't say we did something wrong. Everyone did something right at this point. Of course, it was different for Tony because he had to go all in. He had to get out of there. And naturally, not every project in reality has this urgency like Iron Man, but what do we do about that? And now, if you are to keep one slide in mind, then preferably this one. And that is, the book by Clayton Christensen also greatly influenced my way of thinking about how we should approach projects. He essentially says, briefly, Jens, a hypothesis, what should occur after a certain time, and then really commit everything to it. So in 6 months, we want following process is automated. That's how I also planned the founding of the company, because effort-based planning in IT, especially when it comes to data, becomes very unreliable. And then basically a clear goal. Iron Man said, I want to get out of this cave now, I want to survive, and focus solely on that. Of course, all these MVPs and quick solutions also have disadvantages because there were also technical debts involved. Because anyone who has seen the movie knows that he implanted a nuclear reactor in his chest, and you can't survive forever with that. So eventually it would kill you too. And it's just like a poorly constructed data warehouse that keeps getting slower with more and more things patched onto it. Eventually, it dies too. And of course, he had to remove it. But here too, we had a clear added value. There was also an urgency to eliminate these technical debts. So first he provided the added value, and then the clear prioritization. This thing must come out of my chest. I want to quasi-survive. Again, most data projects, on the other hand, tend to die a slow death. So then we somehow wait until others provide better data. And meanwhile, I can just stop and blame others. We wait, we do something else, we implement a tool first, because no one has ever been fired for implementing SAP. But it just takes time. And by the time everything is done, the decision makers might not even be with the company anymore, and then no one is responsible for the project. And that's why, if I'm advocating for something, it's also about focusing on this shared goal. So the classic scenario is you let student workers somehow do the tedious data work, because apparently the people have more important things to do, but still want to meet the requirements to do something with AI. I would not recommend that, but rather to take responsibility. And also from my own experience, it's just a little less ideology helps too. So I never wanted to use Excel for planning. And what did I do after the first month as a startup? I ended up reporting with Excel and my co-partners and eventually got rid of it. If you're not trapped in a cave and threatened to be killed, then it helps talking to people where the problem is. Because often the issue is not with you, but perhaps the sales, rather with people who simply say at the coffee machine, yes, the process is running slowly. Because when you ask, are you dissatisfied with the tool or with the process? Often there's not so much said. But then when at the coffee machine it says, wow, the monthly closing annoyed me again. I had to somehow copy data from A to B for 3 days and it doesn't work again. Data quality is bad. Those are exactly the infos you need. And from my point of view, Tony did one thing right. Solve the monkey first. And the story of the monkey goes, if you have the task of a monkey standing on a podium, reciting a poem, and you have 3 months for the project, then you should start training the monkey. But what would happen in traditional projects? I am a decision maker. I say, oh, I'm under pressure. I have to report progress. I'll start by building the podium. I'll start as Then, after 1 month, I suddenly have 40% project progress to report because the pedestal is already finished. The monkey is also selected. Yes, speaking, it still can't do. We're still working on that. We have 2 months left. And yes, after 3 months, it might be noticed that the monkey can't recite a poem. But in reality, when projects last for years and people change in between, then you can't even comprehend this problem anymore. And therefore focus on the problem, tackle the hardest first to accomplish it. Is it even possible, this darn monkey, to make talk? Because if he can't do that, then we don't need to do the rest at all and not spend our money on such a pedestal, throw away. And that's what I mean by burn your money faster. Faster projects, quickly focus on the goal, clear time boxing, set a clear hypothesis, and then work solely towards this one goal. But also have the honesty to say, yes, okay, we didn't achieve our goal if it doesn't work out. We hoped that something happens, it didn't happen. That is still much better than having 20 projects that are somehow running and are work in progress for years. And no one dares to really stop something and basically write off money because we've already invested, we'll continue with it, we're still waiting for something. And I really want to oppose that. Better to say, okay, we tried, money is gone, next project. In the long run, it saves you much more than keeping projects alive that don't deserve it. And in this sense, Tony's Day did it right. We are there at the tiny house, and thank you very much for your attention.